Hello and welcome back. Today we look at the most dangerous inmates in prison. Some of these on the list went into prison for petty crimes but committed far worse offences while inside, whereas some were found guilty and handed the harshest sentences, and continued their pattern while incarcerated. We look at their original charges and their chaotic journeys through the prison system to where they are today. So let's get into our first case. 1. Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson has spent many years in prison because of his behaviour inside the prison walls. He has spent periods detained in Rampton, Broadmoor and Ashworth high security psychiatric hospitals. He was first arrested as a petty criminal. He was convicted and sentenced in 1974 to 7 years imprisonment for armed robbery. He was sent to Walton Jail, now known as Liverpool Prison. He soon ended up on the punishment block after attacking 2 prisoners without being provoked. He was transferred to Hull Prison in 1975. After refusing prison work, he smashed up a workshop after an altercation with a prison officer. He was sent to the punishment block where he was sedated. He got 6 months added on to his sentence. He continued to prove to be a highly challenging inmate and was repeatedly placed in solitary confinement for several months. He attacked fellow prisoner John Henry Gallagher with a glass jug and was charged with GBH. He was handed 9 months. He was transferred to Armley Gaol. During 1975 to 1977, he was switched between Armley, Wakefield, Parkhurst and Walton Prison. He was taken from Yorkshire to London, chained to the floor of a prison van. He was kept in solitary confinement and began a fitness program. He continued to attack other convicts and damage prison property. While recovering in solitary confinement from a beating given to him for punching 2 prison officers, he was handed the divorce papers filed by his wife. At Wandsworth, he attempted to poison the prisoner in the cell next to him. He was moved to Parkhurst Prison in 1976, where he befriended the Cray twins, whom he described as the best 2 guys I've ever met. He was moved back to Wandsworth Prison after threatening to take the life of a prison officer. He spent 4 months in isolation after he was caught trying to dig his way out of his cell. After being returned to general population, he caught up with the prisoner who had informed on his escape plan and attacked him. The governor at Wandsworth wanted to transfer Bronson out of his facility, and only the C unit at Parkhurst was willing to accept him. Once at Parkhurst, he attacked an inmate with a jam jar and was again charged with GBH. He attempted to take his own life and attack another prison officer, and he was made subject to a transfer direction order under the Mental Health Act. In December 1978, Charles Bronson arrived at Broadmoor Hospital, but was soon transferred to Rampton Secure Hospital. Unable to adapt to the medication and the other inmates being highly dangerous, Bronson attempted to take the life of John White. John White, who had taken the life of a child, and that's why Bronson chose him, hoping to then be moved to another prison. White survived and Bronson was returned to Broadmoor, where he was reunited with Ronnie Cray. In 1982, he performed his first rooftop protest after escaping to the top of Broadmoor. He tore off roof tiles. Not long after the first incident, he again reached the roof of Broadmoor. He caused £250,000 worth of damage in a 3-day protest before he was talked down by his family. Following further treatment, he took up art. Eventually, he received more prison awards than any other inmate for his poems and cartoons. He made a 3rd rooftop protest, this time demanding a prison transfer, but was again talked down. He then began an 18-day-long hunger strike and was eventually granted a transfer to Ashworth Hospital. Bronson liked the modern facilities and regime at Ashworth, but his behaviour soon returned. He used a sauce bottle to attack another inmate, Mervyn Hawley. He was returned to the general prison population in 1985, but was placed in isolation after punching a fellow inmate. In May 1985, he pled guilty to GBH for the attack on Hawley, and 3 years were added to his sentence. Later in the year, he was returned to Walton, where he made another 3-day rooftop protest causing £100,000 worth of damage. Authorities added another year to his sentence. He was moved to Albany, where he punched another convict on his first day in general prison population. He was quickly moved to Wormwood Scrubs, and 2 weeks later was returned to Wandsworth. In 1986, Bronson was transferred 8 times, the only new location being Winchester Prison. He tried to attack the governor of Wormwood Scrubs during one particular event. On the 3rd of January 1987, he was transferred to Gartree, where he served the rest of his sentence in isolation, other than 10 days spent in Leicester Prison. He was released from prison and stayed with his family for a few days. He journeyed by train to London, bought a water pistol and modified it, and used it to intimidate a stranger into driving him to Luton. On New Year's Day in 1988, he robbed a jewellery shop and kept a ring for his girlfriend Alison. He sold the rest. On the 7th of January 1988, on his 69th day of freedom, he was arrested. He was returned to Leicester Prison, as Bedford Prison refused to house him on account of his uncontrollable behaviour during his first term of imprisonment. His girlfriend Alison retracted her testimony. This removed Bronson's alibi and gave the prosecution all the evidence needed to win the case. He made a failed bid to reach the prison's roof and was transferred to Brixton. Bronson was placed in a top secure unit of 16 prisoners at Brixton. In June 1988, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 7 years. Bronson was taken to Wandsworth before being transferred to Full Sutton. There he spent time in isolation for an attacking a prisoner and a prison officer and throwing water on the governor. He also spent a month at Durham, where he bonded with a family of rodents that crept into his cell. In 1989, he was moved to Long Larton Prison and seemed to settle at the prison. However, he eventually went over the edge and ran a riot in the nude, clutching onto a spear he had made out of a broom handle. He was moved and frequently in trouble, particularly so when he punched 2 prison officers at Gartree and took the deputy governor hostage at Franklin Prison. He was moved to Parkhurst, and he was on the receiving end of an attack when 2 prisoners attacked him several times. Bronson refused to speak to the police about it. He recovered from the attack without further incidents and was released from prison in November 1992. He spent 50 days as a free man before being arrested once more, this time for conspiracy to rob. He was remanded and sent to Wood Hill Prison. While on remand, he took a civilian Liberian hostage. He demanded an inflatable doll, a helicopter, and a cup of tea from the police. He released the hostage. On the 14th of September 1993, he was found guilty of intent to rob and not guilty of conspiracy to rob, while his co-defendant was found innocent of all charges. He was given an 8-year sentence. Bronson was taken from Belmarsh to Wakefield, where he spent 40 days naked in isolation. He was then transferred to Hull Prison. He had many weeks with no incidents, but then he took Governor Adrian Wallace hostage on Easter Monday in 1994. He was overpowered by guards and was transferred to Leicester. He was returned to Wakefield, where he was confined to what was known as the Cage, previously occupied by Robert Maudsley. In April 1996, he was sent back to Belmarsh after taking a doctor hostage. In January 1999, he took 3 inmates hostage, as well as a civilian education worker who criticised one of his drawings. The siege lasted for 44 hours before he released the worker. Bronson was transferred to Whitmore. He appealed against his life sentence, but 3 appeal court judges rejected the application in April 2004. In court, with 6 prison guards surrounding him, Bronson said his wife and her daughter were helping to rehabilitate him. He also showed references about his character, including reports from psychiatrists which were positive. In 2007, 2 prison staff members at Full Sutton were involved in a control and restraint incident in an attempt to prevent another hostage situation, during which Bronson had his tinted glasses broken. Bronson received £200 compensation for his broken glasses. On the 11th of March 2009, his parole was refused. In August 2013, a petition with 10,000 signatures was presented to 10 Downing Street calling for his release. In an enclosed note, Bronson appealed to Prime Minister David Cameron for him to be able to live what's left of my life and not be buried in the prison system. On the 28th of February 2014, Bronson attacked the prison governor in Woodhill over a dispute that his mail was being withheld, including 2 letters from his mother. The governor had serious injuries. In July 2014, Bronson was sentenced to 2 years. The prison had accepted that his mail may have been unacceptably processed. In August 2014, Bronson announced that he was changing his name to Charles Salvador in tribute to one of his favourite artists. This new name, he began creating works of art described as fantasy reality. A collection of these works were auctioned in October 2014. In June 2020, Bronson won a High Court battle for the right for his parole board meeting to be held in public, citing the right to a fair trial. In 2023, his case went to the parole board. They denied parole. They stated they were not satisfied that Mr. Salvador was suitable for release, nor did the panel recommend to the Secretary of State that he should be transferred to an open prison. Bronson was handed a discretionary life sentence with a min term of 4 years in 2000. If released, he will be on a life licence. Let me know in the comments if you feel like the parole should be granted. He has confirmed he will be appealing his case again. I want to end this first case with a more recent statement from Charles Bronson. I've never taken the life of anybody. I wasn't a nice person, and I didn't like him. Salvador is a man of peace. I feel peaceful. Give me a chance, a break, to prove to you people and the prison service and the Home Office and the police that I'm just a normal geezer wanting to get on with his life. I want to get out of prison and turn my life around. I am anti-crime, I am anti-violent, I just want to go out and do my art. As of 2024, he remains in Woodhill Prison and is 71 years old. 2. Robert Maudsley is only dangerous to certain inmates, those who had committed crimes against children. He was essayed and hard by his own father until him and his siblings were removed by social services. He then fell into addiction. In 1974, he took the life of John Farrell, who had committed crimes against children. He surrendered himself to the police, saying he needed psychiatric care. He was found unfit to stand trial and was instead sent to Broadmoor Hospital. In 1977, him and another patient, David Cheeseman, locked themselves in a cell with David Francis, who was convicted of crimes against a child. They took his life. He was convicted of manslaughter and sent to Wakefield Prison. He disliked the transfer and made it clear he wanted to return to Broadmoor. He was later sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that he never be released. In 1978, he took the lives of 2 other prisoners at Wakefield Prison in one day. He had originally set out to take the lives of 7 people. He first took the life of prisoner Solney Darwood and then took the life of another prisoner, William Roberts. After the attacks, he went into the wing office calmly and told the officer what he had done. He stated his victims were those that committed crimes against children, and that those are the people to whom he is a threat to. In 1983, he was deemed too dangerous for a normal cell. Prison authorities built a 2-cell unit in the basement of Wakefield Prison. Due to his history in prisons, when outside of his cell he is escorted by at least 4 prison officers. In March 2000, Maudsley unsuccessfully pleaded for the terms of his solitary confinement to be relaxed. He also asked for a pet budgie, which was denied. He is 70 years old and has been in solitary confinement in a specially built glass cell since 1983. His brother Kevin said that he is happy behind bars and will never apologise for his crimes because they committed crimes on children. 3. Mark Hobson took the lives of 4 people in North Yorkshire in July 2004. He was arrested after an 8-day nationwide manhunt involving more than 500 police officers and 12 police forces, during which time he was Britain's most wanted man. The police discovered notes showing that the crimes were premeditated and well planned, including a to-do note detailing how he planned to lure his girlfriend's twin sister to his flat, and a shopping list for bin liners, tape, tie wraps, fly spray and air freshener. On the evening of the 10th of July 2004, he took the life of his girlfriend, Claire Sanderson. On July 17th, he phoned her twin sister, Diane, and told her Claire was ill. She came to their flat and he also took her life. The next day, he took the lives of an elderly couple, James and Joan Britton, at their home. In 2005, he pled guilty. He was sentenced to 4 terms of life imprisonment with a recommendation that he should never be released. Shortly before his court case, Hobson was placed into solitary confinement for 3 months after attacking Ian Huntley, who took the lives of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. He threw a bucket of boiling water at him. A prison service spokesman said that due to the nature of high security prisoners, it's impossible to prevent incidents of this nature occasionally happening. In January 2006, letters were released from Wakefield Prison, where Hobson blamed alcohol for his crimes. Since being behind bars, he has had many violent outbursts, being put into solitary confinement numerous times. He will remain in prison for the rest of his life. He is 54 years old and is in Wakefield Prison. 4. Damien Folkes was in prison serving a sentence for armed robbery. He was handed a life term in 2002. While in Franklin Prison, he attacked Ian Huntley, who took the lives of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman in March 2010. In 2011, in Full Sutton Prison, he then took the life of Colin Hatch, who was imprisoned for taking the life of child Sean Williams. He told the court he didn't deserve to live. He also shook his head as if disappointed when the court heard it was only good fortune that Ian Huntley survived. He was handed another 18 years for taking the life of Colin Hatch and attacking Ian Huntley. He is currently serving his time in Full Sutton Prison. 5. Paul Sykes was a British heavyweight boxer, but also prisoner. Sykes was classified as one of the most difficult prisoners in the UK throughout the 1970s and 1980s. By 1990, he had spent 21 out of 26 years in 18 prisons. He committed very violent acts against prison officers and police officers. He was in and out of prison for numerous assaults on police officers and civilians. He also took out a contract on a union official from Blackpool. Sykes is mentioned in Charles Bronson's book, A Guide to the Men. Bronson regarded Sykes as the toughest in Britain. He described him as a legend, born and bred, and writes, "I first met Sykes in Liverpool in the early 70s, and at that time he was probably the fittest con in Britain." While in prison, Sykes earned a BA degree in physical sciences from the Open University and wrote a memoir, Sweet Agony, which he won an award for. Following his release from Hull Prison in 1990, producer Roger Greenwood followed him in the course of filming a documentary, Paul Sykes at Large. When released from prison, Sykes had trouble with drinking. In 2000, Wakefield Council secured a 2-year ASBO, banning him from the city centre after a string of aggressive incidents. He was arrested in August 2003 for violating the ban by making an appointment with an optician in Wakefield, but was released. Paul Sykes passed away on the 7th of March 2007. His cause of death was noted as pneumonia. He was 60 years old. 6. Gary Vinter. Gary Vinter is currently serving a whole life sentence. He took the life of his colleague Carl Eden, who was 22 years old, in 1996. He received a life sentence with a 10-year min term and was freed in 2005. He was recalled to prison a year later for a pub brawl. In December 2007, reports stated he was a model prisoner. The parole board allowed his release. Just 2 months after his release from prison, he took the life of his estranged wife, Anne White, in his mother's Middlesbrough home. In July 2011, Vinter attacked Roy Whiting, who took the life of Sarah Payne, in Wakefield Prison. He was given an indefinite sentence, having pleaded guilty to the charge of wounding with intent. At his trial, he said, "The only reason Roy Whiting is still alive is because I got tired." In 2014, in Woodhill Prison, Gary Vinter attacked Lee Newell. He left him blinded in one eye and with brain injuries. Vinter said he launched the attack because he wanted to move to another prison with better gym facilities. He appealed in 2017, arguing that his human rights were being violated by the government for keeping him behind bars for life. It was dismissed. He remains in Franklin Prison and is 55 years old. 7. James O'Rourke. James O'Rourke has been behind bars across Scotland since 1992. He was convicted of taking the life of Neil Carney, who was aged 32. He was given a life sentence. In 1997, he was sentenced to a further 6 years after taking a prison officer and nurse hostage for 19 hours. In 2002, he was given another 8 years for an assault, and in 2004, he was given 4 more years for another assault. In 2005, he was sentenced to 8 years for attempting to attack a prison escort. In 2019, he was handed a 9-year term for attempting to take the life of another prisoner in the gym. He received a second life sentence in July 2022 at the High Court in Glasgow after he admitted for taking the life of fellow prisoner Dean Ramsey 18 months earlier. He is 53 years old and remains in prison. 8. Joanna Dennehy received a whole life order for taking the lives of 3 men. She also attacked 2 other men, but they survived. The crimes took place in Cambridgeshire in March 2013. Before her trial, a plan to escape was revealed which contained the idea of taking the life of a prison officer. In 2019, Dennehy was moved to Low Newton Prison. When she arrived, she threatened to take the life of Rosemary West. Because of this, Rosemary West was moved to another prison. She is 41 years old and remains in Low Newton Prison. 9. Ryan Matthews had been given a life sentence for taking the lives of 2 people in 1983. Under the Mental Health Act, he was removed from prison and sent to Broadmoor Hospital. Gloucestershire police said that his mental health had been deteriorating throughout a number of hospital placements since 1999, when he left Broadmoor High Security Hospital. He arrived in Wootton Lawn Hospital in 2012. On the day he was supposed to be moved to a hospital in Cardiff in July 2015, he took the life of Sharon Wall, who was a nurse at the hospital's facility. His reason for taking her life was that he didn't like that the new hospital had no Wi-Fi and had banned smoking. He was handed a life sentence. 10. Jason Gomez took the life of his business partner, Robert Jones, in 2001 and got handed a life sentence. In 2015, he invited fellow prisoner Darren Flynn into his cell at Swellside Prison. He then took his life. He was handed a whole life order. Gomez was quoted as saying he thought admitting to the crime would avoid this. He has since had multiple appeals turned down. He remains in prison. 11. Russell Oliver. Russell Oliver took the life of John York in Long Lartin Prison in 2015. John York was imprisoned at Long Lartin for taking the life of a man in 2013. Russell Oliver was handed a whole life sentence in 2016. 12. Victor Castigador was jailed for life in 1990 for taking the lives of 2 security guards during a robbery at a Soho amusement arcade. In 2016, while imprisoned at Long Lartin, he took the life of a fellow inmate who had committed crimes on a child. He was handed a second life sentence and moved from Long Lartin Prison to Woodhill Prison. He passed away in prison in 2017 of a heart attack. 13. Stevie Hilden took the life of his cellmate on the 18th of February 2020 in Belmarsh Prison. When questioned, Hilden refused to answer. He was convicted of taking his cellmate's life. Hilden denied this. He was jailed for life with a min term of 17 years before he can be considered for parole. Stevie Hilden was imprisoned for robbery, and the victim, Sandeep Guman, was imprisoned for arson. 14. Michael Parr and Nathan Mann. Michael Parr and Nathan Mann shared fantasies of taking the lives of other inmates while serving life sentences in cells next door to each other at Franklin Prison. They lured Mitchell Harrison into Nathan Mann's cell. They then took his life. Mann was described by a psychiatrist as a remorseless, callous psychopath. Nathan Mann said he had chosen the victim because he was arrogant and they didn't like him. He said they had planned it for a while and just fancied doing it. Mann was already serving life with a min term of 24 years after taking the lives of 2 elderly women in 2007. Parr was sentenced to life in 2003 for attempting to take the life of a patient at a hospital he was being treated in. For taking the life of a fellow prisoner, they were both handed additional life sentences. Parr will have to serve a min of 32 years and Mann will have to serve a min of 40 years. 15. Paul Fitzgerald. The 29-year-old was jailed in 2009 for attacking a woman. He had already essayed a 15-year-old girl and an elderly woman in Wales. In 2019, while serving his time at Full Sutton Prison, he took the life of Richard Huckle, who committed numerous crimes against children. When Paul Fitzgerald was questioned, he said it was poetic justice. He wanted him to feel what his victims had felt. Paul Fitzgerald laughed as he was sentenced to a min term of 34 years. 16. Ian McGowan took the life of Sidney Noble, dubbed Dr. Death. Sidney Noble poisoned more than 50 elderly people in order to steal from them. Ian McGowan went into his cell and took his life in 2005. He was sentenced to 16 years min-term in 2006. Thanks for watching. Until next time.